This morning on BRN, part 2 of our conversation around an innovative 1-minute video game that boasts an 80% success rate in diagnosing autism. And we're going to welcome back to the program Dr. Bahar Tuncgenc of the Nottingham Trent University and Dr. Stewart Mostofsky of Kennedy Krieger Institute. Bahar, Stewart, welcome back to the program. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us again this morning.
Hello.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Bahar, yesterday we had a great conversation about some of the challenges in diagnosing autism. I want to ask, and you brought up technology, and my first question to you is, how important is technology been to diagnosing autism?
There has been a lot of research that has gone into using technology in various ways to help diagnose and also treat autism. So millions of dollars have been spent on neuroscience research, for example, trying to understand the brain-related differences, which uses very advanced imaging technology. Again, millions of dollars have been spent on genetics of autism, really trying to identify the autism gene, or so some autism genes that people can pinpoint so that we can predict who is more or less likely to have autism diagnosis when they're born or when they grow up. Yeah, the genetic approach has had very varied success. There really is no such thing as an autism gene. Yesterday we talked about what a heterogeneous condition this was, and I think that is reflected in the biological makeup of the condition as well. And so it's not surprising that there is not a single gene or a small cluster of genes that determine autism. So I would say that probably Stewart can speak more to this as a clinician, but I would say that most of the autism diagnosis today is actually done without a huge amount of aid from technological tools. Autism is still, by and large, a condition that is diagnosed based on behavioral presentation. And those behaviors are assessed using some standardized questionnaires that the children and or their parents might fulfill. There are some behavioral tests that the children might be subjected to when they come to the clinic, for example, to see how they behave in a communicative, like conversational context, or how they play with toys, what kinds of choices they make, and so on. And so then the clinician would try to infer whether they behave in a more quote unquote autistic way or in a more neurotypical way. So these are usually the methods that are used in order to diagnose autism. So I would say that technology does not really play a huge role in the traditional diagnostic process.
But Stuart, I mean that's changing, and technology in the case that what you and Bahar and the team have been working on. I mean, you've developed a video game called Cami to help in this assessment. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Cami and how that technology has helped make these determinations?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you for the question. I want to first say that I completely agree with everything Bahar said. I think that we're in a state that we've been in for decades, which is that the diagnosis really is based on observation and history taking of around behavioral presentation. There's limited use of technology, but there is clearly a need to potentially leverage technology for a number of reasons. One of them is that access to resources is a challenge. There are, for instance, many rural areas in the United States where getting to a clinician with expertise in autism is a daunting prospect. So the ability to potentially start to leverage technology that would allow for at the very least, some initial remote assessment. Bahar said yesterday, and I think reiterated today, that none of these technologies we feel are necessarily going to replace the careful, clinical, thorough diagnostic process. But they could provide a window that would help us um, screen for and then maybe better target how we approach diagnosis of autism. So with that in mind, and to get to your question, we leveraged decades of research in which people have observed, our own lab and others have observed, that people with autism appear to have challenges quite often with imitating imitating other people's actions. This makes sense in a general way because imitation is really crucial for how we learn. All of us learn social interaction and aspects of communication from very early ages, from the time we're born, pretty much, but or at least within the first year of life, we're observing what the people around us do, and we're developing our repertoire of social interaction, in large part based on what we observe. And the fact that people with autism have challenges with motor imitation sort of gives insight into, at least for some people with autism, what may be a really crucial contributing factor to why they go on to have the challenges they do have with socialization and communication. So with that in mind, we developed this 1-minute video game where there's an avatar, a human video of a human performing a series of actions on the screen. So like, series of movements that they perform, and the instructions for this video game couldn't be simpler. Just imitate everything you see the person doing. And so this computerized assessment of motor imitation, CAMI, was something then we developed and then implemented with children with autism, and in papers that Bahar and I have published, have reported that it is fairly good within 1 minute of time in distinguishing people with autism from people who don't have autism. Now, the most recent paper that we published together is really fascinating in that it reveals not only is this CAMI video game, this 1-minute CAMI video game, able to distinguish children with autism from neurotypical children, it's also fairly reliable in distinguishing children with autism from those who have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. People with ADHD often have some motor challenges, but in years of research, we really haven't observed that people with ADHD have as much difficulty with motor imitation as we see in people with autism. And so the findings were not necessarily entirely surprising, but they were reassuring regarding CAMI, this video game CAMI's ability to potentially help and assist with diagnosis with autism. We, of course, perform this in the lab, but as I mentioned earlier, remote assessment might be increasingly important, and something like this could be leveraged to do remotely.
And Bahar, I mean, 80% success rate based on at least what I read, that's pretty good. I wish I could be right 80% of the time. My wife, by the way, is right 99.9% of the time, so I think you still have some ways to go. But in all seriousness, that's pretty substantial. And how do you take the success of CAMI? Does it get rolled out? How do I access it if I'm a parent? Is it something that a practitioner would have access to, that I have to go to the practitioner? Would my primary care physician or my general general internist for my family, a family medicine doctor, be able to access it in order to steer the child to the right practitioner? How would this all get rolled out?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So maybe something worth explaining before I answer that more directly is just what Cami is. So Stewart already explained that part of what Cami does is it's a video game, right? So there's this avatar that the children are watching and trying to copy the movements of. And we try to make sure that those movements are fun, so they're dance-like movements, but at the same time, we try to pick them based on the literature that we know of and our personal clinical observations as well. We try to pick the movements so that they are particularly the types of movements that autistic children might find challenging. So that video game and the dance element is one side of Cami. But the other side of Cami, so that's the MI in Cami, if you will, the motor imitation side. But the CA, the computerized assessment part, is another crucial part of what constitutes Cami. And that is where we use the technology at its best, really. So as the children do those movements, we record their bodies, their movements, using three-dimensional video cameras. And then we apply an algorithm that we have developed together with our computer scientist collaborators, which analyzes the accuracy of the children's imitation performance. So those two things together, the behavioral side and the algorithm together, are what make up Cami. Now, for this reason, the first part is relatively easy to give to people. I could give you the 1 minute avatar video game, and you could get a child to, imitate it if you put it on your laptop or whatever. But that wouldn't necessarily give you any scores, right? It wouldn't necessarily tell you just how well that child has imitated. In order to understand that part, you need the computerized assessment. And so at the minute, that side is a little clunky, I would say. So it's still a research tool for the moment that we are working to develop so that we can scale it up further. And there might be multiple steps to getting there. One of them is, as I mentioned, in the papers that we have published so far, we have used three-dimensional cameras. So these are specialized cameras that are relatively costly and that require some degree of technical knowledge in order to do the recordings accurately and extract the data from it and so on. And so it's not very easy for a parent to just apply it in their home right now, or for a clinician to do it for that matter. But what we're trying to do is apply Cami to two-dimensional, so-called off-the-shelf cameras that are available to everybody. This is your phone camera, this is your computer camera, because we have cameras everywhere. But there are some technical challenges related to changing Cami from three-dimensional cameras to two-dimensional cameras, and that's exactly what we are working on at the moment. So yeah, in short, to answer your question, I would say at the minute it is a research tool that's not easy to just send over to a clinic or to a parent to apply. But I think right now we are at a stage where we would be really interested to get in those conversations with interested parties, especially in clinical places, perhaps not so much in home settings at the moment, where we can look into opportunities for working together to apply this with the two-dimensional cameras as we continue to develop Cami for that sort of scaling up.
Well, I mean, it certainly sounds like you're headed in the right direction. I mean, 80%, you're boasting an 80% success rate. I couldn't see why someone wouldn't want to partner because the practical applications are just so robust. Stewart, Bahar, we're going to have to leave it there. Great to see you over these past 2 days, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website. And your subscription helps support BRN content. And we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.